going to talk a little Sixers. Inside the Sixers with Paul. He's the host of the Coming In for a Landing podcast. You can read more from him at 973ESPN.com. And the Sixers are finally back in action. It seems like it's been a little while. They take on the Houston Rockets tonight, back home in Philly. 7:30 tonight on 97.3 ESPN. So the 7:30, a little later start. And, of course, Paul Hudrick joins us now for a little Inside the Sixers as we take a closer look at this team. Coming off a 1-3 road trip, Paul, and I want to get your take on, did something happen on that road trip that worries you after watching them lose 3 in a row?
I would just say that their flaws were exposed when you're talking about the bench and when you're talking about the lack of quantity of 3-pointers, not necessarily the degree to which they're hitting them, but the fact that they're just not taking that many. Those are the two things that are most troubling to me that I saw from the road trip. The 1-3 record, I mean, listen, they played 4 really good teams, including literally the best team in the NBA right now, the hottest team in the NBA right now, one of the hottest in the Suns, who, last night they blew a 24-point lead to Brooklyn, but the Suns had been on fire before that. I mean, they played really good teams. So the 1-3, of course, you would have liked to see them do better. If they would have gone 2-2, I would have been actually really impressed, and I think the Sixers would have been pretty happy with that. As it stands, 1-3, yeah, you're obviously a little disappointed by that. But yeah, Mike, if anything, the biggest thing was just those two weaknesses really stood out in all 3 losses.
Yeah, so you talk about the weakness, obviously the bench there, but is there any concern from you, or is it just, hey, that's a style thing with the West Coast? The lack of 3-point attempts they're at like 28th in the league in attempts. You're seeing the Utah team, they're number 1, but you see what happens when you play that style. It seems that that's not a good style for them.
Well, it's simple math, right? 3 is more than 2. And Tobias Harris even acknowledged that the other night. He said, we can't keep getting, it's not, and listen, like, they could be near the bottom of the league and still be really good. I think the Lakers are like 26th or something like that in the league. So you don't have to be the Utah Jazz and fire up the most in the NBA to win every game, but you need to hit a certain level just because that's the way the game has trended. Teams like Portland, teams like Utah, teams like Phoenix, they're going to take a lot, and you have to be able to keep up with that. And it's almost like a paradox with Ben Simmons. I'm sure we're going to get to him, but like the idea that he's scoring more, but he also assists on more 3-pointers than pretty much anybody in the NBA. So it's kind of like a delicate balance. I think almost he has to work out. And then the fact that I just think sometimes a guy like Korkmaz, who really struggled on the road trip, he's not normally he has the most, and forgive me, but like the most irrational confidence of any player I've ever seen. And even he's kind of lost that because he's been a little cold. So I think it's a matter of, and in the second half, I think you saw that against Utah. They just got to fire him. When guys can't hesitate, when they have any type of daylight, the guys who can shoot need to just do it. So I think it's a mix of a lot of things, but yeah, it's a concern, Mike. I think, like I said, I don't think they need to be in the top 5 in the league in attempts, but they can't take, they can't do what they did on the West Coast trip. They can't take like less than 25 a game. You can't do that and win every night in the NBA.
When Brett Brown was here and the Sixers moved on, there was a ton of talk about the organization's use of analytics. You had Brett Brown jacking up a lot of threes, maybe not the greatest shooting team, but that frustrated a lot of people. Maybe you don't have this information, but I'm just curious if you have heard anything about, the philosophy change when it does come to these analytics and if that ties together with the lack of threes that we're seeing.
It's an interesting point, bros. I don't really have it. I don't have any kind of analytical stats for you, but I can tell you that when Doc Rivers first got here, he was very adamant about the fact that he does not care where the points come from as long as the points come. So I think early on in the season, they weren't one of the top teams in the league, but they were taking a pretty healthy amount. And now it just seems to be trending the wrong direction. Part of that, I think, was, Seth Curry was playing really, really well to start the season. He's obviously very much cooled off since he returned. Danny Green hasn't shot the ball at a high level. And as I mentioned, Korkmaz has really struggled so I think the guys that they had been counting on to make those shots are struggling. And I think it's a confidence issue with some of those guys that maybe they're not firing as much. And they see Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons dominating, so they want to get them the ball, which is the right thing to do. But at the same time, to open up the space for those two, you have to make outside shots. And so, yeah, I do think there is somewhat of a philosophical change going from Brett Brown to Doc Rivers, although last year they were kind of at the bottom of the league because I thought that was more due to the roster construction as far as attempts. But yeah, I mean, and then when Doc Rivers was asked about it, and he said, it kind of ebbs and flows as the season goes on. But this is a trend now. I mean, this is like 4 or 5 games, and it's trended downward with less and less attempts as you've gone on here. So that trend's got to reverse at some point, and they have to just start. It's just flat out. They have to start taking more, especially guys who are supposed to be taking them need to just fire away.
Yeah, and you talk about the roster construction last year. Brett wanted them to take a lot of threes. That was part of his message. And then people would say, "Why do you want to take all these threes? You have a terrible 3-point shooting team." Whereas this team isn't shooting as much, but the perception is that the 3-point shooting is better. Is this a good 3-point shooting team?
They have guys who are capable. I mean, there's no questioning that. Again, when you look at Seth Curry, who is the active leader in 3-point percentage. When you look at Danny Green, who he does run hot and cold, but we haven't seen nearly enough of the hot version. We've seen a lot more of the cold. Korkmaz, Shake Milton, even when he has played, his 3-point percentage is down. Here's a guy who was over 40% last year. He's hovering around, I think, like 34% on the season. So, you'd like to see him get going and get a little hotter. Matisse Thybulle is a guy who, he's not a prolific 3-point shooter, but he's, again, last year he hit like 35%, which is an okay number. He's not even near that right now. So I think it's, and then Mike Scott's been out. Mike Scott's a guy who can get hot and hit some shots. So I think it's just a matter of, again, the guys who are supposed to be here, the guys who were brought here to do that, to space the floor and hit threes, need to do it. I think that's the issue. I don't think it's that they don't have the roster to do it. Of course, your 2 best players clearly are, inside players. When you talk about Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, they want to get to the rim, and that's where they want to score. But that's why you required other players that can hit threes so that you're opening it up for them. So I think they have the roster to do that, to take more and to make more. Now, could they use another guy or two to make more? Absolutely. I think Daryl Morey's probably already, looking for more players that fit that. But I do think as their roster is constructed, they have guys that are capable of making and taking more threes.
How do you view the pick and roll defense now that we have 28 games under our belt?
It's been up and down. I would say it's improved from seasons past, for sure. When you look at what they've kind of done, what Dan Burke has kind of instilled with Joel Embiid not playing as much as that drop coverage, where he kind of just goes right back to the rim and playing up more and kind of showing on guards. I thought the most effective you've seen it was against Dame Lillard in the second half of that Portland game. I think Dame was like 2 of 13 in the second half, didn't hit a 3 because they were so aggressively trapping him, and Joel Embiid was showing so hard. So I think, it's mixed results. Sometimes too, I think people don't realize, like the other night when Devin Booker the guy was hitting shots from Yuma, and like people are getting upset with Ben Simmons. It's like sometimes a guy just gets hot. You saw it last night with Dame Lillard. If anyone watched that game against Oklahoma City, Dame Lillard hit 2 shots where Lou Dort played perfect defense. Like, you could not have done anything better than what Lou Dort did against him. And Dame Lillard just buries 2 step-back threes from like 40 feet away. Sometimes guys just make shots because guys are really good. And I think maybe it's because the Sixers haven't had enough guys that do that. So maybe Sixers fans don't realize that that's a thing that happens for other teams. But yeah, I think overall their pick and roll defense better than in years past. But sometimes you just got to tip your hat to the other guy when he's hot and he's hitting shots.
You wrote a piece at 97.3 ESPN.com. I don't want to say it's controversial, but people are, looking at it and saying, the guy's 24 years old. What do you mean he's evolving? You wrote about Ben Simmons and his offense, and enjoy the ride while he's evolving. What are we seeing here that you say is evolving about him? Because some would say he's still not shooting. He's still not outside the paint. We have seen him take the ball to the basket. That's another frustrating part is, okay, he had a monster night. I'm not criticizing him at all, but what did he do that day that made him decide today's the day that I feel like doing this? And why can't he or won't he do that more?
Well, I don't think it was like a today. If you looked at his, I think 7 previous games, his scoring numbers had gone up. So it's not like this was out of nowhere. I mean, it was trending in that direction. I mean, maybe not towards a 42-point game, but clearly he was scoring more. He was being more aggressive. He was attacking more. And I just think it's not like 24 years old is still really young. I mean, I get LeBron James, Kevin Durant, like those guys came into the league and they were unbelievable. But sometimes it takes guys more time to figure things out. And I think Ben Simmons just fits into that category. It's taken him let's look at it like this. The defensive side of the game, he already has that figured out. How many guys have that figured out at 24? Probably not that many. He already had that side figured out. Now he's learning the offensive side and how to score and how to be more effective on that end. And he's learning, just that sometimes, like he's to me at least, the way he looks at the game. And he said this. Melton Brand actually said this last year. He always wants to find the high percentage play, and that's why often he'll pass up a wide open three for himself to try to get a better shooter a wide open three. I think now he's realizing, okay, sometimes the highest percentage play is me going to the rim and taking a guy one-on-one and trying to finish. And I think he's learning, how to do that. He's getting comfortable in certain spots on the floor. You're seeing him finish with his right hand a little more, taking that little hook shot that I think he feels really comfortable with. And then also as a screener and a roller, I thought that's where he was really effective against Utah too. He's setting better screens. He's rolling to the basket better. He's understanding. And it's also like him I think he's reading things better as a scorer. Whereas before, maybe he was more looking to attack defenses, maybe a more holistic approach, looking to get, other guys involved. But I think now he's been looking at it more as, I'm going to get to the rim and I'm going to try to score. And I think he admitted to that. He said that, it's a change in mentality. So I think when I say evolution, I mean, I think he's just seeing things better. And I think, the cliche term is the game is slowing down for him. And I think that's what's happening on the offensive end. He's starting to see the holes. He's starting to see the cracks and where he can attack. And I think that's the evolution. I get people want him to shoot more, but my theory is, he doesn't see that as a high percentage play. And that's why he's not shooting from the outside.
I'll speak for the insanely frustrated crowd. This is where I'm bothered. He takes it as disrespectful when Rudy Gobert's on him. Yet when there's a smaller guard that he should literally laugh in the face of that individual one-on-one, he doesn't take it with that same intensity because he doesn't view that the same way. It's like when he sees LeBron, he gets up and he balls out, which is great. I want him to play great against these top-tier opponents. But I need that mentality. Maybe this is what he's working on. He was pretty vocal about it after last game of adapting in that area. But that should be when Grayson Allen's on you. That should be when anybody else is on you that might not have that name, LeBron or Rudy Gobert. But you should be able to dominate that way more than he does.
Well, and bros, you already mentioned it. He has changed his mentality over the last, 6-7 games. He's averaging over 20 points a game. He's clearly looking to score more. And, I've told you guys before, I really felt like it's not to make excuses. It's just the reality. He had a knee injury. He played, first of all, for one stretch, he played the best basketball of his career for like a 20-game stretch last season where he hit his previous career high 34 points twice in that stretch. So clearly that was, he was playing well there. Then he hurts his knee. He has the NBA in general has a shortened offseason. His offseason is even more short because he's recovering from knee surgery. He's got a new coach. He's got a new system. It took him some time to adjust and feel good. And now we're at a place, he missed 2 games with knee tightness because his knee was bothering him again. Now we're seeing, I think, him being healthy, understanding what Doc Rivers wants out of him, understanding the defense. And I just think it's a culmination of all that happening. And I get we all want to react to every single game, but this is, it takes guys time, and it takes like you'll say Grayson Allen. Yeah, that Memphis game, he was bad in that game. There's no 2 ways about it. They should have beat that Memphis team, and he was not good in that game. You're not going to get an argument from me on that. But I think what you're seeing is a change in mindset, and I think that's the evolution, and I think that's what I was talking about in the article. It's just that he is, the mindset has changed, the way he's seeing the floor has changed, and I think that is what's leading to this higher scoring output. And, yeah, I'm very curious to see, will he keep this up when Joel Embiid is on the floor and when the games get tougher and when defenses play him differently? We'll see what happens. But to me, this is an evolution, and I think, like I said, I think Sixers fans should enjoy the fact that he's evolving into this.
Paul Hudrick, our Sixers insider from 97.3 ESPN.com, host of the Coming In for a Landing podcast. So when you watch the way that you talk, people were like, see how they defended him late? It was 4-on-5. The inbounder, they let him throw the ball in because they don't, even if he's this version of Ben Simmons, a more aggressive guy, I don't think he's going to score 42. But do you still look at it as they're 4-on-5 in certain aspects late in games, and can they get past that?
I don't necessarily look at it like that because I think there's been late game moments. Like I'll go back to all the way back to the opener against Washington, where there was a play, Seth Curry and Joel Embiid were killing the Wizards with the 2-man game. And then at one point, Ben Simmons was in the dunker spot. Seth Curry found him wide open, and he finished with a dunk and sealed the game. So I think there are ways that he can affect the game still, even though maybe, towards like down the stretch, maybe teams, are going to give him a lot of space. They're going to play him differently. But I think there are ways to use him. Now, I do question whether as an inbounder that's effective. I get he's the best passer. He's got the best vision on the team. But I do question whether it's the right strategy to use him as an inbounder because he's not teams are not viewing it as he's going to get that ball back and take a shot. And I also think he's a really one thing it's not the sexiest thing, but he has really become an excellent screener and roller. And that has opened things up for everybody offensively. So I think that's maybe the area I would look to exploit him more as opposed to, as a late game inbounder, I don't love that. But I do think there are ways you can utilize him late in games where he can be effective and he can make a difference down the stretch offensively.
Okay. I don't know that you get a chance to ask multiple questions or whatever. If this, if this were to come up to Ben, does he think that he is becoming a more confident free throw shooter? Because that could change a lot of these things. That if he does this and gets to the line, he's shooting 74%, I think, in the month of February. It's only like 6 games, but does he personally feel more confident there?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually asked him about this. I can't remember the game now for the life of me, but there was a game where he hit a couple
You remember
big free
what he
throws.
did in the opener against Washington, but not when you asked him this question. That's amazing.
I know. It's very selective. There was a game where he, hit a bunch of free throws to kind of help them close out a game. And I specifically asked him, how big of a part of that has been, because I know Sam Cassell has taken a really close approach with him. When you're at the games, when you see Ben Simmons warm up, Sam Cassell is on his hip. He's taking free throws, he's taking mid-range shots, he's taking threes. And it's funny because what he'll do is he'll go to a spot on the floor, take some shots, then he'll go to the free throw line, go to another spot on the floor, then go back to the free throw line. So clearly the free throws have been a really big point of emphasis for him. And when I asked him about it, that's what he said. He's like, it's huge. That development of him hitting free throws is big because that I think gives him the confidence to drive to the lane and either he's going to make it or he's going to get fouled. And if he gets to the line and he shoots 74%, that's a pretty decent percentage. So if he can keep that confidence going, what was he, like 12 or 13 against Utah? So if he can keep that confidence and keep that level up where he's shooting a high rate at the free throw line, I absolutely think that, transcends the other parts of his game to makes him more confident to go to the basket. And, in a late game situation, if they put him on the line, he's going to feel like he's going to make them.
What is your take on, the rumors about guys like George Hill, right, as opposed to hearing maybe that stretch 4 being at the top of the list? Or is it? I don't know. Maybe they are. Maybe that is. But the fact that veteran point guards have been kind of popping out now.
For me, before the season even started, I still thought they were a shot creator away, a guy who can create offense for himself and others away from being kind of like, an elite level. Like, listen, I'm not saying George Hill or DeLon Wright is going to put you over the top, but you've seen what the bench has done and how stagnant that offense has looked. But if you throw a DeLon Wright out there or a George Hill out there who are, a little bit more veteran, who can run an offense, who can run a pick and roll, who are crafty. George Hill has shot the ball a little bit more effectively over the course of his career than DeLon Wright has, but DeLon Wright's not a slouch either. He shoots about league average from 3, so he's capable. I just think that could elevate the bench to such a high degree. I think it could take pressure off of Shake Milton because Shake Milton then doesn't have to run the offense. He can just look to score and attack, and I think that could make him a better player. So for me, and then, you think about it, it's going to be a shortened bench, right? When the playoffs start, how many guys are you going to play? Maybe 9. And so in that regard, I don't think a stretch 4 is necessarily a priority because you have Tobias Harris and you have Ben Simmons who both can play the 4. And if a team goes small and you put Ben Simmons at the 5 and you go small at the 4. So I think there are ways to get around. Listen, if they could get both, that would be ideal. But if it's one or the other, I would prefer the point guard. I would prefer a guy who can run the offense, get the team in their sets, and then create offense for himself and others.
All right. Would you trade Tobias Harris for Blake Griffin?
No.
Good. All right. We're just making sure. This, for credibility's sake.
Yeah, your job was on the line there. You passed.
I would have fired. Yeah, you should have fired anyone who would have said yes to that.
Oh, man.
No, but listen, if Blake Griffin if he gets, it seems to me like a buyout is going to be what happens because that contract is the worst contract in the NBA. If he's bought out, if he wants to come here and be a backup 4/stretch 5, I'd consider it. I don't know what opportunities he's going to have. I don't know if a team's going to try to offer him to start. Clearly not the guy he once was, but he can score in the post. He can rebound. He can set good screens.
The
he's
game
big,
he played
he's physical.
here 2 years ago with Detroit, he was phenomenal.
He had
that
50.
night.
He had
He had
50.
50, yeah.
Yeah, he shot 36% from 3 that year, and I was like, man, this guy's game has evolved big time from being just Lob City dunker, but there's no way. Now, the only thing I said yesterday to Broads, and get your take on this, Paul, is if Morey decides that contract only has 2 years and Harris just has, 3 or 4, that gets me out of this huge commitment faster.
Nah.
All right. I'm just saying.
I hear what you're saying, but first of all, I mean, Tobias Harris, I think, is playing better than any of us expected coming into the
just
season.
gives him more freedom faster.
No, I get it. And if there was a player that I just think Blake Griffin, that contract is just so bad as far as I just think he's so diminished as a player. And listen, I think he could still be a useful, it's kind of like Carmelo Anthony. I see it as similar to that, where Carmelo Anthony really had to eat some big time humble pie. He had he sat out for basically a year until Portland offered him a shot. And then the only way he got back in was accepting, okay, I can be a bench player. I can help this team out as a supplemental scorer. If Blake Griffin is willing to do that, if he's willing to be a guy who can come off the bench, who can give you, again, some post scoring off the bench, maybe stretch the floor and hit a 3 every once in a while, play some tough defense, commit some hard professional fouls every once in a while. If he's willing to be that guy, I'd absolutely take a flyer on him if he gets bought out.
Yeah.
But if he's not, if he wants a starting role, then no, I'm not interested at all.
Paul Hudrick, at Paul Hudrick is the Twitter address where you can heckle him if he thought that you should make a trade of Blake Griffin for Tobias Harris. But thankfully he did not. You can read more at 973ESPN.com. And his podcast, of course, he's the host of the Coming In for a Landing podcast. He'll be back on Friday for Inside the Sixers. Thanks, man.
You got him, Mike.
All right, he, like all guys, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. He's fantastic.